Eve Online. It is Thursday, August 27th. We're going to do a bit of a roundtable here today. We have Villian here, Caleb, a couple people already left. And Rich is in here. You'll hear his voice, as well as Sugar, I believe. So in any case, there's an essay that was written by Asher Elias talking about why Goonswarm are the good guys, and it's a nice long essay with some really good responses in the comments, and it's sparked some discussion about messaging and leadership and overall psychological war, as we call it. So what did you guys think of that essay, and what do you think is he's trying to do?
It's a bold and public statement about how he feels that the ways people vilify Goonswarm Federation are not valid. He goes into detail about certain past deeds and misdeeds of Goonswarm Federation, addresses them in certain ways, and he also addresses how he believes Goonswarm Federation has changed for the better. He believes it's changed from its older culture, which it's traditionally been vilified for, along with its the deeds of its leadership, and he goes into some detail about how the new goons have gone under a cultural revolution and are not like this at all. But curiously, he also deflects the blame towards Test, where he states that the old goon culture that's gotten them into trouble are now the cultures of Test today. He discusses about the wars that Goonswarm has partaken in, and the ones that he's partaken in. It's a curious statement, though. Though he is I believe, the military leader of Goonswarm Federation. I'm curious to how much strength this is, whether this is an official statement and a representative of Goonswarm Federation, or is this just a mere op-ed of his own opinion?
Well, Caleb, why are you guys both boycotting this issue?
Well, I don't really know how to react to any of this, because every time I try to make it a sane discussion, it goes into insanity. I wrote this article 4 years ago. It was pretty much my sentiments when I said how the casino wars made me a goon, and that's pretty much what I'm going to reference to when we're talking about culture in EVE Online. It's a very deep topic. It goes into all the stuff about 4chan, lolsec, essay, all of these topics. Simplifying it like this and poo-pooing on Asher's comment, which in my opinion just reads like, please shut the fuck up, Don King, because you're just spinning like a crazy person. That's really where I stand, right? I think it's a really good post. I think it's valid, and I have plenty of real life friends in EVE that can mirror exactly what he's writing about, and it's even more so than what he's writing about. So I don't want to partake in this back and forth when it becomes spun out of proportions and reality.
Well, I'll partake. He talks about how goons are the bad guys of EVE because of their past. Their past has not exactly been clean. They've done all sorts of things to earn themselves that bad reputation. But he talks about how it's all changed now and how things have gotten better. Like Goonswarm is no longer the same as it was in the past. However, if this is I'm not sure if this is a public apology or acknowledgement of their misdeeds, or is it just an op-ed? Because the issue I have with Goonswarm Federation and Imperium is it always seems there's only one person whose opinion matters, and that person is obviously the Mittani. Everybody else is their opinion, at least to me, is just discardable. They could be written off. I'm curious to see if this statement will be officially backed, or if this is just somebody making an apology. The real life, if I were to draw a real life example, it would be perhaps something like the issue of Japan refusing to apologize. Some lower level officials have, but obviously the big leader on top never has, and that's been a source of contention in real life politics between the two countries. Just like how the deeds of goons in the past has become a source of contention for many people to go goons today. Obviously, there's been various incidents. The Wizard Hat incident, which I believe it was apologized for and dealt with, along with certain other things. However, there have been more recent and very serious issues that of actions being taken against people out of game. I believe the Goonswarm director who did all of this and was sponsored by Goonswarm that did this is no longer in Goonswarm. However, I don't believe there was ever an apology or ever anything released about it. So that's obviously going to be a source of contention for some too.
Well, aside from the fact that you already had this discussion earlier today and you got some really good replies, and you're not really relaying those replies, I don't really know if I even want to be drawn into this. And I respect many of your opinions, but when we're talking Eve culture and deep Eve history, I find like it's a bit of a joke that I have to sit here and listen to this.
You're free not to partake. I'm aware that I've gotten some responses, and people have told me that Asher's words are, good as gold, that it does represent Goonswarm Federation. We'll have to see if this is the case. I'm going to go ahead and, believe that what Asher has said does represent Goonswarm, though I'd like to talk to him about some more about it.
That's not what it's about. It's more about the fact that this is what Asher is saying as a person, right? You want it to be these official statements and restitution apologies and mittens prostrating and walking with bells and yelling of shame. It's like that's just ridiculous. I find it ridiculous because Sins of the Father, right? I know that people are saying, well, this is events that happened from 2011 and forward. So that's fine. I'm just saying that a lot of the opinions are formed in so deep a past that to try to pick it apart and then say, oh, this is just about what happened from 2015 and forward, or these events that happened. It's like, well, you have to look at it individually and discuss it in detail. Otherwise, it just becomes the same goons, but it's like, okay, fine.
You say Sins of the Father, but I believe he is the father as of current. I understand that, obviously, we don't want to punish the son for the deeds of the father. However, in this case, it is the father that people have grievance with, and legitimate grievance. I fully understand that when Asher talks about the Mittani being like a wrestler with kayfabe, there is, obviously the face, the act, the heel. They behave in a certain way and act in a certain way. However, it's undeniable that there have been certain things that he has done that are legitimately bad and not just part of an act. These things, he wasn't acting as bad at the time doing that. He was bad.
Again, you're gonna have to be specific, because otherwise I can't really comment. There's one comment in that thread that I think basically nails it. It's the comment that basically says it's funny to see how SA goons, by actually joining EVE Online and playing EVE Online, they grew up and they're no longer really what you would call original SA goons. They still are, of course. Like, I'm still a 4chaner. I was on 4chan when it was still fun. Right now, it's a toxic cesspool, and it's devolved into split ups with QAnon and all that crap. These people are what I call normies that came in and toxified my community. And this is just the same in many ways in EVE Online. A lot of people that don't really get it coming in, and then either they make it even more toxic, or they try to go full social justice warrior, and then suddenly nothing is allowed anymore. It's just a very, very deep cultural history that you have to pick apart in each of the detailed topics. You cannot do what you're doing with just slamming them all together and then saying, oh, Asher is speaking for the Imperium. That's not what's happening.
I see. The elephant in the room of his misdeeds in the past involve, pretty clearly doxing. And when we say Sins of the Father, Mittani took power, I believe, in 2010. The doxing incident, Digital Ebola. Goonswarm Federation director, sponsored by Goonswarm, and did this for Goonswarm in, I believe, 2014, 15, 16, and onwards, until he was sometime later removed at a date I do not quite recall. And I believe it's, I do not like cancel culture either. However, I believe it's important for people to, well, address that that things in the past might have been wrong, that they might have been somebody that they're not proud of, and while I do, they shouldn't be cancelled for it, but rather they should acknowledge it and understand it and move on and strive and promise that they will be better people. It's if you've ever seen the old Tom and Jerry cartoons, you'll see that Tom and Jerry was very prejudiced at the time. And when they released it, there was a statement by Whoopi Goldberg talking about how the depictions of the past were, well, prejudiced. They were wrong then and they were wrong now, but they were a product of their time. And rather than censor it and delete it and pretend it never existed, they released it exactly as it is. And they said an apology. They said that this does not represent the company of today. And we haven't seen anything like this. I would certainly apologize for some of the things I've done on the internet when I was younger, and I would acknowledge it because that is who I am. I'm not going to hide it, and I'm certainly not going to pretend it doesn't exist.
I can't really take you back in a DeLorean and show you how things developed and why these things are logical. And when you're bringing up the Digi thing and the doxing and the cyber stalking and all of these things, it's a fine line, and a lot of EVE players break that line again and again. And this is not a specifically Goon thing. This whole breaching of the barrier or the walls of the game is happening in pretty much every group in EVE, and there's always these stupid toxic elements. Recently, we just had this no name, completely unknown goon that basically made a mess over in Echoes and tried to get people to pay him real life money. And we had things like the Olivia case with catfishing. We've had when someone was actually trying to blame Mittens for alleged sexual inappropriate behavior. There's just always this bullshit happening. And then the other week, right, we were talking to Iron Bank because he had been appearing on Ron's stream. And then it got into the whole topic of doxing of, I think it was EVE. The point that he had a public company where you could basically just do a public LLC lookup, and you could actually see his name. That's not doxing. It's just there's just these tiptoes and gray areas when you play EVE Online, especially when you play EVE Online on a high level, and you're looking at things like spy games and shit like that. It's not as simple as you make it. It frustrates me that you simplify this and then you pull in everyone to take blame for what one toxic apple is doing. Well, it's just unfair.
Let me jump in here since I started it and haven't been talking much. We're taking on this issue as kind of a separate talk discussion. There were a bunch of people in here and they all took off when we went live because nobody wants to be on the record, I guess. But I thought some very interesting things were spoken about in regards to this article, what it's messaging, maybe a little on its motivation side, but also the validity of what it says. And as described earlier by Rich, the article basically says, goons are the good guys. Keep your head up. We have a lot to be proud of. We're not as bad as they say we are. And what we keep diving into when people want to say that goons are bad for this game or goons are the bad guys, this is why we're all attacking them, is their history and some of their rambunctious and I don't know if it's antisocial, but it's anti-establishment kind of history. And that's what it goes back to. But let's make a distinction between 2010 and before and 2010 and afterwards so that we don't blur the lines. Why is that important, Caleb? Why is it important not to
it's important because of the DNA of goons, right? DNA of goons is basically that they come from really old school internet nerds, right? And yes, back then things were so different, and the language and the tone was accepting things that today is completely unacceptable, right? And you can even say that these guys were from the age groups of like 13 to early 20s.
You're
The internet,
assuming.
no, it was well known that the internet user base was very
Oh.
young demographics back then. Of course, there were some veterans, like seriously
It was-
old dudes that were the early guys that created everything and created the internet. Of
Well,
course, they were there.
No, I
but
think the early
average
users, the early users of the internet were like college and above. There weren't a lot of kids on the internet. Access to the internet was too slow. That didn't really open up until the late 90s.
Yeah, but I'm saying when we started with what is considered the internet, it got young pretty fast, right?
Again, I was witnessing the internet between 90, I want to say 93. It was around, of course, before that, but 93 it really got in, the web started, all the way to about 98. It was pretty much like an adult area where you could have good discussions and that sort of stuff. And then in the late 90s, early 2000s, every family had access, and it just started to, all the kids started to play, let's just say immature people, whether they were young or old.
And that's the important part. That's what I'm trying to explain, that initially, of course, it was the actual academics, right? It was people on university campuses and stuff like that that even had access. The rest of us didn't get access until quite a bit later. I'm just saying that the people that then ran to the internet were the young ones, right? It was the young demographics. What you see is that I think you can say when the 9600 baud modems came out, it was the young teenagers and people in their early 20s that started populating it with quite rebel like behavior. We can talk about things like the Anarchist Cookbook and all that stuff, and hacking and phreaking and blue boxing and whatnot. It's like that was the culture. Of course, some of the older dudes were also involved in it, but it was primarily the young teenagers having fun, making a mess, smashing mailboxes with baseball bats. That was what we did. I'm sorry, but that was what we did. And the tone and the language was very insider-like and very smack talk hard. It was like listening to a bunch of teenagers in a basement, right? That's just what it was, because that was primarily the demographics. So you could say that to an outsider, the language and the culture that developed was very harsh and almost what today would be considered toxic, right? It was locker room talk. It was well, I won't use those words too much on the stream, but that was just what we did. It was how we communicated. It was how we had fun. It's equivalent to when teenagers sit and laugh at their dad's porn magazines and stuff like that. It's just, that's what it was like, right? And from that, it grew into more organization. They got a little bit more adult. They started being active on some of the early forums, Usenet, SA, RSC, all of these things. And again, I mentioned all of these things in my article from 14. It was just a different world, and that slowly matured. And what happened when the Mittani took over Goons, he tried to clean up their act a little bit, but he was still from the same DNA. We have to acknowledge that. So adulting and growing up takes time, but all the cultural revolution stuff that's happened on the inside of Goons and later the Imperium is just a process of that. And what I keep saying is that Goons have been cleaning up their act in EVE Online earlier than any of the other groups. They are catching up. It was also mentioned with the whole thing with Goons are usually the ones doing something first, with the exception of the feeder corp, quote unquote, right? Where you could say that Brave was first, right?
Wait, that was a point of discussion. Why was Brave first when Goons actually brought a bunch of people in and did 1,000 rifters sort of thing?
Yeah, and that's the argument, right? Goons were actually more open and friendly to new bros very early on in their playstyle because they were the rebels. They were the ones rebelling against the establishment, Bob and whatnot, right? And it's also mentioned in the thread. There's plenty of these comments. It's just it's
Well, hold
always
on, hold
ignored,
on.
and then it's like, oh, you're trying to whitewash goons.
Well,
no,
Hold on a
it's
second.
just facts.
Hold on a second.
You walked over that too fast. Let me just correct something. You walked over that too fast. You couldn't be in Goonswarm unless you were in SA. You were in something awful forums initially.
Yeah, true.
Hold on a second.
But that doesn't mean that there's this same vetting and skill requirements, and you have to have played EVE for X amount of months. If you don't have at least this level of ability to fly ships, you're not going to get in at all, and all that stuff.
Well,
Back then it was just, have you paid your $10? Come fly, and we go
No,
out.
it was
in
more
concerts,
like
right?
puppies don't need to apply. This is only for us. It's our thing. That's not what Brave did at all.
Hold on a second. Then why is it? Then would it be so difficult for some? Well, to acknowledge that in the past there were some very different cultures and things that you are not proud of that was wrong then and wrong now, but was representative of things of the past. And why is it so hard to acknowledge this and well, say that we are no longer like this and we apologize for what how things were like, and we strive to move on and be better? Why is it so difficult to make an
Because
apology?
you're being silly. Because you're being silly.
Is
You're
it being
asking
silly?
me. Yes, because you're asking me to take responsibility of stuff.
I'm not
I did
asking
when-
you. I'm just.
No. But it's equivalent. It's equivalent to you asking me to take
I'm
responsibility.
making the rhetorical
of-
question.
Yeah, and I'm trying to explain to you that you're asking me to stand up for what I did as a teenager. I own that, but I'm not gonna apologize for every single mistake I ever did, because you come in here and pseudo social justice warrior about stuff I did to people that I've already apologized to. It's not your beef.
I think some of the things that Goonswarm Federation did in the past is certainly should be the beef of anybody who has a legitimate concern and legitimate grievance against Goonswarm Federation. I think there's still players today that have been affected by them, that they certainly have legitimate grievance over it. I mean, how difficult is it to acknowledge it? It's I believe in one of the books they've completely washed it over to try and change
in
that
our
fact.
language, we would call what you're doing necroing, right? You're basically bringing up a thread that's already dead.
I call it
Is it?
necroing, but
Is it dead? I think the fact that it's been brought up by Asher is shows that there's the grievance is very much alive. But
I
But
think
why are you
there's,
grieved for something that you weren't around to see? I don't understand that. Why do you ask for apologies and prostration for things that is no longer relevant? It's been dealt with, and you were told how it was dealt with, and you ignored that.
Well, let's get it straight. The Caleb, we wanted to separate 2010 and before, right? So we're just talking about the modern Imperium, and why does a message need to come out that we're not the bad guys?
it's a bold statement, both as a weapon against the enemies and also a shield to protect your own. It's a shield to protect your own to say that the people who accuse you of doing these wrong things are, well, wrong, and they themselves are bad. And it's also a weapon against the enemies to make them doubt themselves and say, is this really a war we should be fighting? Are we the bad guys? Are we being lied to? It's a propaganda statement. It's not only a very valid essay by Asher, but it's also a propaganda tool, a weapon, both against pointed at the enemy and also against, well, technically a shield against yourselves.
Okay, my main beef with this whole discussion is exactly what you are representing. It's the fact that someone like you brings up the whole Wizard's Hat incident. We're over it. We're so much past it, and it's so long ago. It was dealt with. There was apologies. There was consequences. Everyone involved have moved on, and the fact that you people, yes, I am putting you in that category, because you bring it up all the time, and it's like every single time we have to tell you about the storybooks again.
Okay, well, I'll have to retort to that. This is the only time in this discussion I brought it up, and I only bring it up as an example. And I've said that I do not... the Wizard Hat incident does not concern me. I think it's been apologized for, it's been dealt with. It's just brought up as a reference. What I'd like you to discuss is the actions of Digital Ebola rather than the Wizard Hat incident, which was never addressed and never apologized for.
I almost covered that. I don't need to go into details, but I said Spyworks and these types of personalities exist everywhere in EVE. And yes, the whole Digi thing, horrible, and I'm pretty sure that it's closed now.
It doesn't appear so, according to what's being posted on the thread. Anyway.
Okay.
I am very curious about, we talk about the old culture of goons, the old culture of the internet. I'm very curious about this statement by by Asher here, and he says that the old culture of goons is a test culture of today. We had some back and forth discussion earlier where we had doubts whether, doubts and questions on what it was about. I thought it was more about the social culture of goons and social culture of test, while I believe Vidi and others thought it was more about the military culture of goons and, of test. I'm actually curious where that comes from when he talks about that the old culture of goons is a new culture of test today. And I've reached out to Asher to get his opinion on it and to clarify it.
By the way, Billy, you're sitting on your mic there, dragging it around. If you can hear me. All right, so we've opened up the discussion. More people have come in. You guys are welcome to weigh in on this. We're talking about the message put out by Asher. If you guys have any comments.
It's dead, Jim.
I think they're more referring, Rich, to the fact that goons used to be a Helldunk or a Blue Ball sort of alliance. They would either blob the hell out of you and kill everything, or just straight up not fight you. And now that has gone to test, but you're either going to get blobbed by thousands of things, or you're not going to get fought.
I think that's what a lot of people are missing about this post, that it's from a military perspective in many of the issues that is brought up.
I'm not too sure because I recently had some conversations with people from the Imperium, and they addressed the culture of Goonswarm Federation Imperium today, and I reflected on that with them with my experience of the culture and test. And, the fact I heard some interesting discussion there, which is why I'm reaching out to Asher. And that's how I came to that conclusion when I read his statement about his opinion on the cultural shift.
Okay, let me put it like this. If I was still an editor in INN and had gotten a post like this, I would have said, Asher, you have 3 different threads that are running in this article. You don't really clarify them very well, and you don't finish any of them very well. You're going to have to rewrite and add at least another third to this article, because otherwise it doesn't make sense. And that's pretty much what brings on all this discussion, because it is different topics and they are conflated in there.
I see how the culture thing came from a military perspective, though I'd love to hear, if Asher has any opinions on what I thought it was at the time.
It's a logical conflation, right? Because of his role and what he does in EVE. So it's logical that he thinks about this from that perspective. It just that means that something like culture to him means something about how wars are conducted. But that's just simplifying it. And it's his perspective. And you have to read this essay from his perspective, instead of this whole thing of, oh, he's trying to do something spin-wise, or he has this agenda, or he wants to frame goons in a certain way, or he's trying to clean up the act so it doesn't have fallout with morale. It's like, you guys are reading this on something that's clearly not there. It's a late night, my thoughts based on what has been going on, how things are looking, and how he feels, right?
Unfortunately, it's difficult to relate to Asher or many of the members of the Imperium because they are, for the better part, generally unavailable unless you are part of the Imperium itself. So it's very difficult to contact them and to have any sort of discussion with them, in my experience. With somebody, and it's also I've also got concerns whether or not his opinions, represent anything. Because if I were to speak to somebody like Lady Scarlet, or if I were to speak to Headliner or Gobbins or Villy, when they say something, they speak on behalf of their alliance. When I get an opinion from them, that is the opinion of their alliance. They represent what they say. What they say goes. If I got a message from Lady Scarlet saying, if you mess with the Renters anymore, I'll drop NC on you, I know that is representative of NC and their intentions. However, with Asher here, I'm not. Is this something that can be relied on, or is this just an opinion editorial? I want to. Well, it's better to hear from somebody who is, for the better part, what they say goes rather than what they say it's just an opinion as a layman. You want to hear from representatives and people who are qualified, who are stating things and are willing to put their reputation on the line rather than just, an opinion.
Well, Asher isn't just anybody.
Well, is he putting this out as the military representative of Goon Swarm Federation? Then what he says goes, or is he putting it on here as I'm Asher? This is my opinion. I just happen to do this, and I'm not representing anything, and what I say could be overridden. You want a reliable opinion, don't you?
Yeah. Well, it's open for discussion. What posture do you think he is taking by publishing this? Is he speaking from one player to other players, or is he speaking from one military leader to other militaries? Like, what point of view do you think he's coming from?
It's too early to call it, because from my perspective of Goon culture and Goon hierarchy, most of the time it's always been one person's opinion is the only one that matters. Only what the Mittani says matters. Everybody else can be written off. In this case, I'd certainly hope to believe that what he says goes, and it's a representative Goon Swarm Federation. But I always have that lingering doubt. I'm going to go ahead and say it is a representative Goon Swarm Federation, and what he says does go, but I still have that lingering doubt, and I can't get it out of my head.
Well, that question's for everybody, like not just you, Rich, but what do you guys think? What angle is he coming from? Does it matter?
Well, the first comment we got was this proves that Goons and the Imperium are afraid. And I could have said the same about the SOTA that Dinkle did, that, he's talking about classiness and keeping it on the field because of the declaration of war against Brave. It's like, that's just not facts. It's an unfair characterization that everything that everyone says is always some sort of massive high-level spin.
So you don't see this as a sign that they're nervous? The Imperium?
No, I think it's a sign that that Asher might have some personal thoughts about, say, the tone of things and how some people have reacted and how some communications are happening right now. It's I think I tried to cover it pretty much for the past 2 weeks. The fact that I am surprised at how classy and adult this war has been this early on, and now it's starting to
what war
wobble.
Right?
Yeah, what war? That's a different topic. That's the whole joke about the fact that there is actually no war going on because destruction numbers are a joke.
Well, we're kidding. You can't look at it just by the economy.
I mean, you can though. Look at what I posted in. Voice chat.
Should we save that for your show? I wasn't going to put it up for that.
No,
reason.
that's for K Space. That's not even for J Space, dude. Like that, I took all of J Space kills out of that. That's.
I'll put it up in a second, but I just want to, before we get off topic, Jay Roger says, can't agree more. This is a morale boost article. What do you guys think of that?
Well,
a little bit, yeah. It is.
A soldier never fights for the wrong side, and he always believes that he's fighting for the. He should always believe he's fighting for the right side. He's fighting for the best army. He's commanded by the best generals, and he's given the best equipment. However, obviously, if every other person is saying, "Oh, you're a bad guy. You do this, you do that," and you ask yourself, "Do I really do this?" and you ask your own leadership, "Is this really us?" Well, eventually. They'll obviously tell you, no, this isn't what you are. This is what they're telling you, and this is This is not only a statement to tell those players who have any doubts that they're fighting for the wrong side, to tell them that they know you are fighting for the right side, that we are not what our enemy tells you that we are. But it's also a statement to the enemy to say that they have also not only have you been lying to our members, but you yourself have been lied to by your own leadership. It's a double-edged sword, and it's quite an elegant one.
I'd like to take a very short moment to go on the topic of IP tracing and identity checking, just for the case of helping Rich realize that there was a time when these things were very difficult and very complicated. And if you wanted to have any chance of actually defending yourself from massive spy infiltration, you did these things. It was just the way to do it.
If you log on to somebody's website and you use their services, you give your IP address to them. That's something that is reality, and it's something I accept, and I do not count it as part of that. I am more concerned about when they start using real-life tactics to harass you and distract you and cause issues in your own life. More reminiscent of the Stasi of East Germany, in some way. When they use your real-life identity and personal details and things that should remain private and away from video games to be used against you. And to give some examples, we'll just start off with, let's say, personal circumstances, sexual orientation, and financial circumstances. Those are some of the things that have been used and weaponized against other people in EVE Online by various groups, but also including Goonswarm Federation, which has been addressed in the past, but never resolved.
Okay, let me go back to something we were talking about earlier, and that is, what's the purpose of the post? Is it a morale boost? And if it is it directed at their own people? Because that seems to be what you're saying, Rich, right?
Yeah, it's a motivator, demotivator. It's a double-edged sword. It's a sword and shield. A shield for yourself to protect your own line members, and also a sword at the enemy to point them and say, this is you, and this is what you're going to run yourself into if you do not stop.
Okay, can we agree that there's a difference between intention and result?
Did you say result or resolve?
Result, right? One thing is how this is received, and another way is what it was meant to do. You guys are just putting so many intentions and overthinking things into posting a post on Reddit. I don't think Asher was turning every leaf and considering everything about what this is supposed to do internally, externally, propaganda-wise, narrative-wise, or even historical culture and culture-wise. It's just you're giving too much credit. That's not why most people write, and they don't think that deep when they write.
Mm-hmm. So you think he just wanted to say something?
Well, this is unfortunately, this is a side effect of the public education system of the United Kingdom and my analysis of English literature when I was younger. And when I read this essay and I analyze it, I like to pick out the small parts. I could be wrong and I could be right. He may have written this to articulate so well, or he might have just written this on a whim. We'll have to find out, and whether or not we believe him when he tells us is also up to debate.
This is like listening to people reading Tolkien in high school or something like that, where it's like, so what is the content and what's his inspirational sources? And then they start with all this Freudian stuff and Marxian stuff, and then they go, oh, it's all a big analogy of his experiences in the war. And well, while some of these things might be true, it's just taking it to a whole nother level, and that's not what people do when they write.
Let's set aside the intention. What do you think the result is then, if you don't want to talk about intention?
Well, the result is pretty much eye of the beholder, right? Where are you and how do you receive this? And if you are, say, a Goon line member, you might say, okay, yeah, cool, we get the better fights and we have the better culture. If you're on the outside, it's like, oh, this is spin and lies. and they're afraid. And if that motivates more and better war, fine, then it's working as intended.
I think the intention here is to correct the record, at least on their perspective and their side.
But they do this every 2 to 3 years because it's always moving. It's always growing and developing. And that goes for most groups in EVE, thank God. We're not all like back in the Bob days.
Reasonable. But yes, I feel this is to correct the record, to tell them, this is what we believe is going on, and we're going to call out anybody who attempts to subvert or divert things and try to prevent people from assuming control of certain things. It's just to correct the record and tell them what we think.
Anyone else read these articles? You guys want to weigh in here? Okay. I was kind of impressed by the quality of the comments, which are surprising.
Yes, they were very much adult and moderated. Again, we're back to the why is this war not getting toxic yet? And in before Tiberius says, what war?
Yeah, what war?
All right, well.
It says right here, obviously, I like to address the whole wrestler thing and how Mittani is the heel, which, for anybody not versed in professional American wrestling, face would mean the good guy, and heel is to say bad guy. So for somebody to turn heel would mean to turn bad guy. And kayfabe means just the whole idea of maintaining the air of realism, despite the fact that people know he's not actually a bad guy. They, maintain kayfabe. They pretend he's a bad guy. And unfortunately, everybody should know that if you pretend to be a bad guy sometimes, if you pretend to be something that you're not, then some people will genuinely believe this.
Yeah, and especially I like the fact that you're bringing up wrestling because that's so relevant. If you consider that the majority of information that outsiders are getting about goons and goon culture and the stance of the whole thing is from things like the Meta Show. The Meta Show is currently consisting of a weird evil Don King personality or some version of Kissinger role played, right? And then Baghdad Alley, right? It's like how can it get more wrestling? This is not real, guys.
Are you accusing them of not being factual? Are you accusing them of being entertainment rather than anything of credit worthy?
That's what it is.
Is that what is that a statement or is it an opinion?
Do you think
that's a statement? It's from clear analysis. If you take most of that, if you take more than 10% of that as serious, you're missing the point.
Good God, you've just accused all of the Meta Show viewers of people who consume yellow journalism. That's quite offensive. I think that a lot of people who tune into these shows believe that they're hearing genuine and truthful analysis and information. You've accused them of yellow journalism, reading yellow journalism.
Well, worse, you've accused them of watching wrestling.
That's what it is. I see. Okay. The Mittani is a very old school role player and LARPer, right? His image that he is using is this mock Kissinger from Dr. Strangelove, right? All of this stuff is in the intro to the Meta Show. If you're not getting this, you're just lost in a completely different universe. This is why we play, because it's funny. It's cool. It's dramatic. It's role playing taken to the next level where most people don't even know they're role playing, which is almost ironic. And this is the audience that Rich is pointing to. The people. This is why I like the fact that he brought up wrestling. There are people that think wrestling is real.
And for my 12-year-old self, wrestling is real. It's real in that people do get hurt. It's real in that it's not easy, and it's real as in that the emotions and the I guess the way the people feel strongly about their role is very much real here, and I'd say this is the same for Eve, though. A lot of the leadership will roleplay and act in a certain way. The game is going to be very real, and your experience in this war and everything is going to also be real. And nobody should don't let anybody tell you that it's fake or that they're pretending.
Caleb, are clowns real? Just because they scare kids or make them happy?
Are we going down some sort of Stephen King path now? Is that where we're trending? But I see that the entirety of chat has just got their mind blown that the meta show is not real and wrestling is not real. I think they need to like swallow that and let that sink in before they go on.
Regardless, in wrestling, while a lot of things are kayfabe, and it's
kayfabe.
Well, kayfabe is the idea of suspending disbelief in wrestling. So it's about maintaining the realism of fiction. So that's what kayfabe is. It's a term for it. But while there are things that are in Eve that are role played and faked and acted, and it's kayfabe and all part of the persona, there are things that are real, or in wrestling terms, legit. So it's important when we talk about these things that we separate certain people's
I don't know what you're talking about.
Kayfabe and acted persona from
if you're trying to say that wrestling is real, because I can tell you just from my very small experience with martial arts that if anyone did what's done in the ring in wrestling, there would be fatalities every single match.
Kayfabe is the idea that you suspend disbelief when two wrestlers climb to the top of a ring over the cage. That's kayfabe. That's all part of the planned act. You suspend the disbelief because it's entertaining. Legit is when he accidentally broke the ring and fell through 6 feet onto the hard floor. That was legit. That wasn't planned. And that's the difference between kayfabe and legit. But that's a wrestling analogy. While it's kayfabe that the Mittani is this evil person who rules this Nullsec Empire as its god king. What isn't kayfabe and what was legit is some of the terrible misdeeds that Goonswarm did in order to gain the upper hand in the past.
All right. All right, Caleb, it sounds like you're all talked out.
No. I was just letting him have the floor and left a bit of silence because it's just funny. It's funny to me sometimes how people think that, the Mittani is evil. That's the whole point. He comes from evil. He was born, or rather embraced into evil, and it's his job.
Well, unfortunately, if you put on a disguise, if you put on an act, if you put on a role that you play, sometimes when people don't know you're acting and you're merely pretending, they'll treat you that way. If you walk around in a doctor's suit, people are going to think you're a doctor when they don't know you're just showing up in a party costume.
Well, it's worse than that. It's more like those crazy people that write Parliament in the UK because of things that's happening on a TV soap.
Well, the other analogy is if you want to act like somebody who slings mud and throws spears, and it should be no surprise when somebody treats you that way, even if you're just merely pretending.
All right, let's show the economic view of this war.
What war?
Uh-oh.
Explain what's going on there.
There you go, Tiberius. Take it away.
So you'll see two lines. The first line is fielded, which basically represents the full value of the kill mail. So, if you have an 800 million ISK kill mail, then it's, the total value. That's what the total value adds up to. The orange line is the ISK sink. And unfortunately, you can't get a full picture as to what that means because of the way that loot drops work. ISK sink just basically means like that ISK is lost forever from the game. The value of whatever it is that was in that kill mail is completely gone. So, you could have a kill mail with like 10% of its items dropped, or you could have a kill mail that has 90% of its items dropped. So just because of the way that loot drops work on kill mails, it's really hard to kind of get a good understanding as to what that means. But as you can see, that the total value that has been destroyed dropped by 10 trillion ISK from June to July, which is just astounding to me, considering we've got a war going on. And I would also like to add that this is I've removed all JSpace kills from this report here. So nothing in JSpace is added up here. This is all of KSpace. This isn't just nullsec or anything else like that. This is all of KSpace. And it could be, there's a couple of variants that you could really think of as like, oh, well, there's COVID going on, and there's the war, and the people might not be undocking stuff, and it could be because of recent balance changes and stuff. But you could speculate that all day long, but the numbers don't lie, in and of the sense that there has been a humongous drop in stuff that has died.
I'm curious, but looking at this chart, do you have the numbers of ships that have been destroyed?
I don't. I just put this. I put this together haphazardly this morning.
I see, because with the war going on, I believe people are more hesitant to field certain ships, whether that be for own personal pleasure or for more military and alliance-focused things, where the risks now for losing something is far greater than the risks before. So it could be that in the past, obviously prior to the war, people were far more willing to field more and more expensive things because of the reduced presence of enemies so close by. But with the war going on now, these big expensive things are, no longer on field out of fear that the enemy are so close. So I think it's a bit misleading to say that with the purely value-based.
It's more that 2/3 of nullsec are now glued to each other to fight the other third. And those 2/3 would usually fight each other.
That's an interesting thought.
It's an interesting fact.
And these fights are going to be more rank and file and pitched with doctrine ships rather than, certain fights involving. There's going to be a lot less Rorqual and super kills if I'm to believe that they've all been left docked up out of fear.
All right, so somebody said in chat, who cares unless you can compare the numbers to last year in July? So let me pull those numbers up for you real quick. I can't show you on screen because I don't have a graph put together here. Stand by just 1 second. And that's actually, it's a really keen point to point out, and I would just like to make sure that that's discussed. So July of last year, there was 34 34.9 trillion ISK was destroyed in KSpace, and 28 trillion ISK was synced. So 28 trillion ISK was evaporated from the game, and approximately 34.9 trillion ISK was destroyed in terms of like kill mail value. So, even still, that's still a pretty significant drop. That's, you're talking about almost a 20% drop in comparison to July of last year. So That's a good point to point out, but there's still, a statistical evidence to suggest that, there's just the war has caused a pretty huge drop in stuff dying.
I like to see the numbers of ships dying, because obviously if the Pappy side broke into D4K using Munins, it would have been a lot more of an expensive slaughter, but they instead chose to use cormorants in far greater numbers and huge waves upon waves of cormorant attacks. And, well, that should certainly affect the amount of numbers, but it's also a lot cheaper than fielding waves of Munins, which are infinitely, more expensive.
Does it include citadels or just ships? It does include citadels, so all kill mail values. There's nothing was left out. All kill mails that generate on through the game appear on this graph.
Do keep in mind there is also the calm before the storm, in terms of a lot of citadels being destroyed prior to this war due to the abandoned citadels update.
Right,
That abandoned citadels update wasn't last year.
Well,
So
compared
even if you
to,
compare the
I'm
numbers.
comparing them to more recent months in terms of citadel.
Well,
deaths.
when was the citadel abandonment date? What month did that come out? Because I've got 6 months of data here. So
It was the 26th of May.
okay.
But you always see this, right? I think what Rich was pointing out is something that I'm pretty sure is also something that we would have seen in pretty much all the wars throughout EVE history, that you have this small silent period just before the forces actually clash. It's just in this case, because it's pretty much everyone, then that results in that dip under the curve in the destruction numbers in a way that I don't think we've seen before, but it's pretty much semi-expected. It's just right now it looks almost ludicrous because it's almost an inverse war, right? We're in a point where instead of doing what we normally see, that destruction goes above production, it's actually dipping so low. There's like, is anything really happening? But I do think that it is going to catch up on the other side of Delve. And we will see the traditional numbers, and the graph will definitely shift. It's going to have a crazy spike because the destruction value that I expect on the other side is going to be a bloodbath. It's going to peak higher than we've seen before.
Peace is dangerous. Peace is expensive. You can see it right here. Wars are cheap looking at this.
So somebody asked in chat where it was kind of semi-answered already. So where does this graph come from? This was a graph that I put together. I have kept a log of all of the raw paste data from CCP's data dumps and their CSV files from the MERs. And I put this graph together from February to July. So the source of this data is coming directly from CCP. Matterall, is there a way to maybe put this in chat so people can have it for themselves?
We need a URL for that. Let me try to do. Yeah, I think we need a URL. Well, we'll figure something out. Let's see.
There is a URL from Discord itself that works fine in the browser.
Does it? I'll check it out.
Yeah, I just linked it.
Oh, does that work? Didn't know that worked. Wow, fantastic.
You guys want a clearer image of the of what Matterall's showing? You guys can click on that and you can see the data points for yourself.
So the June peak, I would honestly say, accounts for the abandoned citadels. But even like compared to the previous 3 months, July is just insane for how little has happened.
Well, again, that's July. There was really only one fight in July that was consequential that I can think of as far as damage done or things destroyed. But there have been keep stars since July, haven't there?
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what happens with August. I'm really hoping that CCP gets into the habit of re-releasing MER data at the end of, or sorry, at the beginning of the month as opposed to the end of the month, because it's really like I know that they've got a lot of stuff going on with COVID and whatnot, but it's a lot easier to kind of remember where data points are and take notes of like, okay, oh, this is why this happened. Oh, this is why that happened. Et cetera, kind of logging events and, notes as to, why things may be the way that they are.
Yeah, let's look at a different thing, a different view on the same war. We'll look at participation numbers for the last 3 weeks. This was posted on Reddit. One takeaway is that huge bump from Goon Swarm is after Boats and Sister Bliss's bombing run. You guys have any comments on participation?
I think that's a really interesting graph. I think that if that coincides exactly with the Boat Bliss bomb, I think that's kind of cool, because that means that at least someone must have been sitting there thinking, oh, am I going to join this war? And then they saw that and said, okay, this actually does look fun, and might have locked in some of their characters and rejoined the game. But in general, I think the numbers are not that important or strong. I think the main ones are the initiative holding and Brave increasing. I think that's kind of telling, right? Brave people that might really want to be part of this and come and defend Brave and win the war are definitely locking back in, if I read that correctly. And initiative is digging in, right? It's pretty much what it's saying. Anything else? I think they've already shed all their Exceed accounts, because they've been pretty much the ones taking the brunt of the force very early on in the war. So they would already have had that. I don't know if you have this graph further back. There might have been a dip early on, but now the people that are in initiative are the people that's going to stay, well, at least until the war gets terrible. And I'm pretty sure that that's what the graph is showing.
I think he has posted before. Yes, I'll take a look at it. So these are numbers starting. These dates are all backwards for me. I guess this is the previous week, yeah.
Yeah, and it's showing very much what I just said and expected, right? It shed its excess back then.
You can see some Goonswarm numbers softening, and then after that bombing...
Please don't conflate me with or mistake me for Cable. I am not Cable.
After that bombing, they go back up again. They start coming down a bit, kind of stabilized. But, that bombing run was a huge moral victory. We pointed that out at the time. All right, anything else?
Nothing I can think of off the top of my head.
Well, thanks for that. You really contributed well today with your own original information.
My pleasure. I get enjoyment out of looking at statistical data. I think it's important to look at that, because a lot of times these kinds of conversations get conflated with opinions, and a lot of opinions are valid, but sometimes it's hard to remember that there is, statistical data to kind of, drive the questions and the narrative in order to, move conversation forward.
Yeah. So when is your next wormhole show on TIS?
Oh yeah, so our next show is going to be on Saturday at 2200 Eve time, so that's UTC. We're going to be going over wormhole economics, which includes site running, blue loot, how to do sites, and how it compares to K-Space, PvE in general, so even like wormhole industry, and we're going to be talking about different people's opinions on how it could be, improved, what the strengths are, what the weaknesses are, and it's going to be a good time and a good conversation. So come check us out on Saturday. If you guys don't have anything going on, I believe that's 6 p.m. Eastern, 2200 UTC.
I look for Tiberius and the Anoikis Connection show. Is that what it is?
Yes, that's what it's called.
All right. Thanks. Next thing I want to show you guys, and we'll end with this, is a really cool map of New Eden from a low-sec perspective. Made like a subway map. Do you guys see this?
Yep. So I'm not quite sure what exactly that's supposed to represent for quote-unquote low-sec. Is that just like routes or back and forth between things?
Anyone know?
Or is this just like an artistic thing that somebody wanted to put together?
It's a tube map.
But what do the
I guess
tubes
so.
represent?
It just shows all the potential connections from important locations, right? I'm pretty sure that it doesn't have every location because it's not a .land representation. It's a flattened huge subway map using the tube map design to show the most relevant paths between big hubs and then substations, right? So middle points and all that shenanigans. And it's very well made, graphically really pretty. I'd put that on my wall.
Yeah, I think it's the pipes, low-sec and high-sec, basically routes that you can take. And
there were a couple of
points of
null
interest.
and there were a couple of null-sec systems on that map, but it was mostly the big routes through low-sec.
I think that Calamari is now closed, isn't it? It's closed for reconstruction after Triglavians took it.
I don't know how recent this map is, and especially now that you're zooming in on it, I can't see most of the systems that might have been hit. Can you find Niagia?
Yeah.
But it definitely looks graphically pleasing.
I think this is post Niarja.
Yeah, honestly, this reminds me more of the German tube map of Berlin than of the London one. This one confuses me a little bit. I have a hard time finding my way, whereas the London tube is very easy to understand.
Yeah, I don't know. It's worth investigating, like what this is supposed to mean. But there you go.
I do think that the chat might feel a little bit like I do. It's like, shut up and take my money. Like, where can I get this as a poster?
No, we don't care.
We need more stuff like this. It's cool.
That's quite good. Quite good. Okay. Well, thanks everybody for hanging out with us. We're going to finish up today. We'll be back tomorrow with actual news updates and stuff. We've taken a couple days off to do more discussion stuff because my speaking time has been limited. So we'll try to get back to more going through the headlines. But we do want to say that the last two shows have been very interesting. The first half of yesterday was a bit about video gaming in general and EVE Echoes. The second half was about EVE Online and the reasons to play. And then today we took up Asher's article on from the Goon Swarm perspective, or actually Asher's perspective, on who the good guys are in this war. And its response, very polite responses, and you know, it wasn't a short article, but it was well conveyed. And then we looked at some of the economic aspects of the war here in the second half of this one. So if you didn't get a chance, you should go back and watch yesterday's show, and then tomorrow we'll get back to actual news. You guys got anything else? Tiberius, thanks a lot. Rich, thanks a lot. Caleb, we will see you guys tomorrow. Who should we raid?
Jibby.
Yes. My problem is I don't know his name. It's Evlog, right?
Evlog, yes.
Absolutely. These guys are great fun.
Jibby is amazing.
There you go, guys. Have a great time.